Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. South Korea's consumer regulator has ordered the country's largest mobile carrier, SK Telecom, to compensate millions of customers affected by the company's massive data breach. The measure is not legally binding, but if SK Telecom accepts the mediation proposal, total compensation could exceed $1.5 billion. South Korea's presidential office has now officially moved back to its former home, Cheong Wa Dae, also known as the Blue House, a move that was one of President Lee's key campaign pledges. Officials from South Korea and Russia reportedly held closed-door talks in Moscow on North Korea's nuclear program and regional security issues. But Russia's foreign ministry denied this, saying they're not discussing any issues that can affect inter-Korean relations. We begin this morning with South Korean mobile carrier SK Telecom that's now facing mounting pressure after regulators ruled it should compensate millions of customers affected by a massive data breach. Our Muniran starts us off.
South Korea's Consumer Protection Agency has issued a ruling over a major SK Telecom data breach that exposed the SIM card information of 23 million subscribers last April, which triggered widespread disruption as users replaced SIMs. The Consumer Dispute Mediation Committee under the Korea Consumer Agency ruled that personal data had been leaked and that consumer harm had occurred, determining that SK Telecom bears responsibility for compensation. The ruling follows a collective mediation request filed in May by 58 affected subscribers. After 3 rounds of deliberations, the committee approved a compensation proposal worth 100,000 Korean won, just under $68 per person. Compensation will not be paid in cash. Instead, if the compensation plan goes ahead, subscribers will receive a discount of about $30 on mobile service fees, along with an equal amount in points usable at affiliated partner stores, including convenience stores and bakeries. The committee added that SK Telecom's previously offered 50% discount on August mobile service fees will be deducted from the total compensation amount. It also emphasized that the ruling does not constitute a legal determination of liability under privacy laws, but is aimed at prioritizing swift consumer relief following the data breach. If SK Telecom accepts the mediation proposal, it will carry the same legal effect as a court settlement. The company has 15 days from receiving the decision to notify the committee whether it will accept the terms. The committee has also stated that, if accepted, the compensation plan would apply to not only the 58 applicants, but to all 23 million subscribers affected by the data leak. If fully implemented, the total compensation could reach above $1.5 billion. SK Telecom said it will carefully review the decision before making a final determination. The company has already taken follow-up measures, including SIM replacements for all subscribers and a separate customer compensation package, and was fined more than $91 million by the Personal Information Protection Commission. With the mediation ruling potentially adding another $1 trillion level financial burden, SK Telecom's decision is being closely watched. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
After weeks of preparations, the presidential office is entering the final phase of its return to Cheong Wa Dae, the Blue House. And with the move nearly complete, the presidential press corps has also relocated and live briefings will begin there today. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yoo-jin walks us through the return and what the revived Cheong Wa Dae will look like.
For the first time in years, cameras are getting a rare look inside the Yongsan presidential office, where workers are moving wrapped furniture out of the building. The destination? Cheong Wa Dae, also known as the Blue House. After more than 3.5 years, South Korea's top office is heading back to its former home, just behind Gyeongbokgung Palace in downtown Seoul.
The presidential office will now leave the Yongsan era behind and return to the Blue House, the place where the president originally was and belongs.
Returning to Cheong Wa Dae was one of President Lee's key campaign pledges.
청와대를 신속하게 좀 보수해서 그대로 다시 들어가는 게 제일 좋겠다.
He has argued that the compound is better equipped with established security, protocol, and diplomatic infrastructure, making it more cost-efficient and operationally effective. The previous Yoon Suk-yeol administration relocated the presidential office to the Defense Ministry compound in 2022, saying that Cheong Wa Dae symbolized an overly centralized imperial presidency distant from the public. Since August, Cheong Wa Dae has been closed to visitors, so it could undergo renovation work in preparation for the return. So what will the revived presidential compound look like? The layout itself remains largely unchanged. The main building houses the president's office and reception rooms. Yeomingwan buildings 1 through 3 serve as offices for his aides. There is also the Yeongbingwan State Guest House, the Chunchugan Press Center, and the presidential residence. What will change is how the space is used. President Lee plans to work primarily from Yeomingwan rather than the main building to streamline communication and decision-making. The presidential residence, however, will not be used immediately as additional refurbishment is required. Most of the relocation is expected to be completed around Christmas, with President Lee likely to begin officially commuting to Cheong Wa Dae from his current residence in Hannam-dong toward the end of the year. The Lee administration says that moving back to the Blue House will not mean a return to its old image, which was often criticized as closed and authoritarian. Officials say they plan to expand online live streams of President Lee's official engagements, as well as minimize security restrictions around the area. And while access will be limited, the administration plans to reopen Cheong Wa Dae to visitors next year. 송유진, Arirang News.
A standoff is expected at South Korea's National Assembly today as the ruling Democratic Party moves to pass a bill establishing a dedicated trial division for insurrection cases. A revised version of the bill will be tabled at Monday's plenary session, limiting the special court to appellate trials. It also excludes non-judicial figures from the judge selection process. While the main opposition People Power Party has vowed to launch a filibuster, arguing the bill amounts to judicial overreach and should be scrapped, the DP's majority makes passage likely. The ruling party is also set to advance amendments to the Act on Promotion of Information and Communications Network Utilization and Information Protection, raising the prospect of continued filibuster clashes through the year-end session. South Korea and Russia have reportedly held closed-door talks in Moscow on North Korea's nuclear program and broader regional security issues. Now, that's according to diplomatic sources on Sunday, who said a South Korean Foreign Ministry official in charge of North Korean nuclear affairs recently visited Moscow and met with Oleg Burmistrov, Russia's ambassador at large for the North Korean nuclear issue, along with other Russian officials. During the meetings, the South Korean side reportedly urged Russia to play a constructive role in maintaining peace on the Korean peninsula, as Seoul looks to resume dialogue with North Korea next year. However, Russia's foreign ministry has denied claims that the meetings amounted to official negotiations on North Korea's nuclear program. The country's national security advisor, Ri Sung-rak, recently held talks with U.S. officials in Washington and said the two countries will start holding simultaneous discussions next year on implementing agreements reached at the summit between President Lee Jae-myung and Donald Trump in October. Now, for more on bilateral relations between Seoul and Washington, we're joined today by Daniel Connolly, Associate Professor of International Relations at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Professor Connolly, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So do these discussions mean the two sides will be able to speed up talks on issues like building a nuclear power submarine and civil uranium enrichment?
Well, certainly the terminology simultaneous discussions can be interpreted as indicating that both sides want to kind of speed up these talks. Talking in parallel, of course, is always much quicker than sequential negotiations. But I do feel that the terminology simultaneous can also be a warning sign that there's maybe some key differences in how the two sides understand the issue. I think for the ROK especially, they tend to view this indigenous nuclear fuel cycle, nuclear submarines, spent fuel reprocessing, all as part of the same issue. And if you remember, President Lee's initial request was to basically build nuclear submarines as a part of this nuclear enrichment control over the fuel cycle. But for the US, they may want to break these proposals into different tracks. And that would mean they prioritize maybe South Korea's purchase of US nuclear technology for submarines, but they're less eager to facilitate South Korea's indigenous technological development. So in this case, maybe parallel discussions could be maybe a negative sign for South Korea's ambitions to have an indigenous nuclear fuel cycle.
I see. And on trade issues, the U.S. Trade Representative has reportedly canceled an annual meeting with South Korean officials on the free trade agreement over Seoul's pursuit of digital proposals that the Trump administration views as discriminatory. Does this suggest the two countries have sort of differing views on digital regulations?
Yes, absolutely. Not only is this a difference of opinion on digital regulations, but I think it's a more fundamental sign that the United States is rejecting all international attempts to regulate its tech giants, which it sees as its kind of key competitive advantage in today's geopolitical economic competition. Just last week, we had the United States criticize the European Union for something similar. And I would say the same dynamic is unfolding in the case of the ROK in the US. But in the case of Europe, it's about investigations and laws already enacted. In the case of South Korea, I think the United States is trying to preemptively prevent some upcoming laws, especially the Online Platform Monopoly Prohibition Act, which is a proposed law in South Korea. And I think the stakes are a little bit higher for the case of South Korea as well, because unlike the European Union, which is mostly just a market for US tech giants, South Korea has more to lose because its own technology giants are much more competitive with US platforms. That might be why the United States is trying to preemptively prevent some of these South Korean monopoly laws from being passed.
Right. And a foreign minister recently said the Korean government will work on holding another summit between President Lee and Trump next year. How do you expect the bilateral relations to develop in the coming year?
Well, I could give the usual platitudes about a strong ROK-US alliance as a cornerstone of peace in East Asia, but it's also important to be very brutally honest that this is a very different era. This is a very different United States from past administrations. The recently published US National Security Strategy is quite brutally honest, and I quote from it, "In everything we do, we are putting America first." They say it explicitly, very openly, and by extension, this means everything that the US asks the ROK to do is going to be putting America first as well. And this year, South Korea has essentially promised to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in the United States just for the privilege of trading with the US at a 15% tariff rate. In the year ahead, ironing out this promise into actual policies and regulations is going to be a very difficult and complex process. And I personally expect the US is going to escalate. They're going to demand as much as they can from South Korean negotiators, which means the ROK is going to have to be very creative to safeguard South Korea's interests and find ways of maybe loosening this dependency on the United States.
Right. And what the foreign minister also said is that while Korea will strengthen relations with the U.S. and Japan, Korea will also boost trilateral cooperation with China and Japan. How do you think South Korea should balance relations with Washington and Beijing in 2026?
Right, and this is the key issue, I believe, because the root cause of South Korea's weaknesses is its dependency on the great powers. And back in 2016, we saw this in the case of the THAAD controversy with China. What happened after the THAAD controversy, US officials encouraged South Korea to diversify away from China to strengthen Korea's sovereignty. The Yoon administration became very dependent on the United States, not only for security, but also for economic prosperity. Now Trump has a great deal of leverage over South Korea and has been kind of really demanding a lot of concessions from the South Korean side. And it's a very vicious cycle because buying US goodwill with concessions creates more dependency and creates less maneuver room next time Trump asks for more concessions. So I think the key for South Korea's relations with China and the United States in the year ahead is creating autonomy from both of them. And creating autonomy is expensive and difficult, but it actually increases South Korea's diplomatic value in the long run. And I think it's a very difficult policy to plot, but it would be one that has much more long-term advantages for South Korea in 2026 and beyond.
I see, it really is a complicated issue. We'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Connolly, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Over in the United States, more than a dozen files which contain documents related to Jeffrey Epstein have disappeared from the U.S. Justice Department's public webpage. Now, while the Democrats called for greater transparency, a top Trump administration official defended the decision, saying it was necessary to protect survivors of sexual abuse. Our Lee Seung-jae has the details.
At least 16 files have disappeared from the U.S. Justice Department's public webpage containing documents related to Jeffrey Epstein, less than 24 hours after they were posted, with no explanation from the government and no public notice. The missing files were available on Friday but were no longer accessible by Saturday. They included several images, among them paintings depicting nude women and a photograph showing a series of images arranged along a credenza and inside drawers. One of those images showed a photograph of Donald Trump alongside Epstein, Melania Trump, and Epstein's longtime associate Ghislaine Maxwell. The unexplained removal of the files has fueled speculation online over what was taken down and why the public was not notified, intensifying long-standing scrutiny surrounding Epstein and his connections to powerful figures. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee highlighted the missing image featuring Trump in a post on X, calling for greater transparency. Tens of thousands of pages were made public Friday, but critics say the material offered little new insight into Epstein's crimes or the prosecutorial decisions that allowed him to avoid serious federal charges for years. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche on Sunday defended the limited release, saying the department was required to balance transparency with the need to protect survivors of sexual abuse. Speaking on NBC's Meet the Press, Blanche said continued document review was necessary to prevent harm to victims.
And so we learned after releasing that photograph that there were concerns about those women and the fact that we had put that photo up. So we pulled that photo down. It has nothing to do with President Trump. There are dozens of photos of President Trump already released to the public, seeing him with Mr. Epstein.
He said the Trump administration remains committed to meeting its legal obligations to release the files, but emphasized that the process would take time. For now, the unexplained disappearance of the documents has only intensified calls for clarity, accountability, and fuller disclosure in a case that continues to raise questions years after Epstein's death. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. The United States says recent talks with Ukraine and European partners on ending the war with Russia were productive and constructive. White House envoy Steve Witkoff met with Ukrainian and European representatives in Florida to align on a shared strategic approach. Simultaneously, Kremlin envoy Kirill Dmitriev held discussions with U.S. officials in Miami, describing the negotiations as constructive. While President Zelensky noted that diplomatic efforts are moving quickly, the Kremlin denied that there were any preparations for formal three-way talks involving the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. In South Africa, a mass shooting at a township pub near Johannesburg has killed 9 people and wounded at least 10 others. Police say multiple gunmen arrived in vehicles and began shooting patrons just before 1 a.m. Sunday local time in Bekkersdale, west of Johannesburg, before fleeing the scene. Authorities confirmed the attackers used an assault rifle and handguns and that some victims were shot randomly in nearby streets. The motive still remains unknown and police have launched a manhunt. The shooting comes amid growing concern over rising gun violence across the country. Israel has approved 19 new Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank, a move that raises tensions over the future of a Palestinian state. The cabinet's decision on Sunday increases the total number of settlements in the West Bank to more than 200, marking a record expansion under Israel's current far-right government. The move comes as the U.S. pushes for a Gaza ceasefire plan that includes a pathway to Palestinian statehood, an outcome these settlements are designed to prevent. International law widely considers these settlements as illegal. A muddy eruption burst from Black Diamond Pool in Yellowstone National Park, sending debris into the air as cameras captured the rare event. U.S. Geological Survey scientists say the eruption occurred Saturday morning in Biscuit Basin, an area previously damaged by a hydrothermal explosion last year. Researchers say new monitoring equipment is now helping track these unpredictable geothermal eruptions.
Today marks the winter solstice, and the morning cold was pretty harsh this morning. A cold wave advisory has been issued for parts of Gyeongsang-do provinces, where temperatures have dropped more than 10 degrees overnight. And today stays colder than average for this time of year, but the temperature will slowly climb during the day, and it's going to stay above norms through Christmas Eve, but the big chill returns on Christmas Day. But this afternoon, highs will reach 4 degrees Celsius here in Seoul, which is a couple of degrees higher than yesterday. Daegu gets up to 8 degrees under mostly sunny skies with good air quality nationwide. Then 5 to 20 millimeters of rain is in the forecast between Tuesday and Wednesday morning, which will bring colder air to the country. So by the latter part of the week, even daytime temperatures will very struggle to rise above freezing. So plan accordingly for your Christmas weekend.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.